great to see so many of you showing up this morning and wanting to join our first seminar on blockchain technology and how we actually can take and use that technology in the healthcare sector, etc. My name is Katrine Myhre. I am the CEO of the cluster Oslo Medtech, and I will be sharing this session, introducing all the people that are going to present. For you to know, I'll start out. We are actually streaming the seminar, so you can also, later on, you can pick up all the presentations and everything on Facebook. That also means that people have to be on speaking here. That's for all of you that are going to present. But that's a good thing. That's one thing. Another thing is that we will have several of the presentations or presenters are going to be not in the room. One in Trondheim, one speaker from Commission EU in Brussels, I guess. So we will have online speakers as well. But hopefully the technology will be friendly to us today, so that we will actually make that happen in a good way. I thought I'd start with just giving a few words about Oslo Medtech. What is this cluster, etc. We are today more than 200 members. We organized as a membership organization. We were founded back in 2009. In Norway, we have a cluster program financed and driven by Innovation Norway in order to actually grow a new industry in different kind of areas. So we have clusters in oil and gas, of course, in fish farming, in lots of other areas as well. Oslo Medtech is part of, or we are a Norwegian center of expertise in this cluster, and we are also in connection with a lot of other clusters in Europe. As you can see, our cluster, we have members in the full value chain. That means that both R&D institutions, the hospitals and municipalities, those who actually are using the technology, both the users as patients or doctors, etc., but also those that actually are buying the solutions are part of the cluster. We have investors in the cluster. We have technology transfer offices and incubators in the cluster. We have all the service providers, distributors, but again, the main actors in the cluster are companies. Both startup companies, SMEs, and larger companies, both Norwegian companies and international companies. And a lot of you are represented here today. The fields that we actually are addressing is most companies are in diagnostic, medtech, eHealth, or connected care, but we're also having more and more companies in the biotech, pharma, computational life science field, and also human life science field. The aim of the cluster is to stimulate growth in the Norwegian health industry through members and our ecosystem. So what Oslo Medtech do is to bring down barriers, open up doors in order actually to have this happen. And the main goal is to increase the competitiveness of the companies, but also actually to strengthen the attraction of the cluster internationally. And that means we have a lot of things, good technology, good solutions, good R&D, good hospitals, municipalities as well in Norway. It's just that Norway hasn't been that good at telling actually the stories out there. So what we do today as well is actually also part of making that attraction happening. Oslo Medtech has over the last years developed an innovation platform. And that platform both consists of the healthcare providers, of the industry. We are very well connected with the R&D institutions, also with the students themselves. And we are also in good dialogue with the ministries and different political parties. This year it's an election year in Norway, and we will of course make use of that opportunity as well to actually raise the awareness of our industry. As you can see, we have several services that we do. We run competence programs. When we started off back in 2009, in Norway we did not have a complete innovation infrastructure. We didn't have test facilities, we did not have an incubator, etc., etc. So Oslo Medtech has also been focusing on actually building that infrastructure. And it's getting better and better. We still lack something on the private capital, so during the fall we will launch an investor network, among other things. We have built a quite large network of both national and international partners. we run an EU program, and as part of that, we are very well connected with interesting clusters all over Europe, and through our international activity as well, quite good connected to both US, Canada, starting in China as well, Japan, etc., etc., just for you to know. What we do today is to actually try to focus on new disruptive technology and how can we actually make use of that technology in order to solve some of the unmet medical needs in the sector. And when we say in the sector, it could be, of course, for the industry itself, but at least in Norway, where we have the public healthcare providers, it's also how can actually the healthcare providers take and use this technology in collaboration with the industry. And that is what we're going to explore today. Oops. Again, I did bring in this. This is UN's 17 sustainable health and or values, different areas. How can we actually make sure to make a sustainable world? Health is the third factor here, and the question is also how could actually blockchain technology help us develop a more sustainable world? Question mark. It's up to you actually to help us answer this. When it comes to Norway and the assets of Norway, those of us living in Norway and dealing with this know that we're quite strong in R&D in this field. We spend a lot of money in R&D. What Norway have not been that good at doing is actually to making new products and solutions based on that R&D. That is one of the things that we are working on and try to stimulate. We have a lot of great databases, data registries. The question is how can we actually make an ICT system so that both the researchers and the industry can actually get access to that data in a secure and good way. That might be something that we would like to touch upon during the seminar today as well. We have great, good hospitals, a great health system, and as a cluster, we push for using our healthcare system in order to test and verify new technological solutions as well. And I think that during the day today, we will touch upon that as well. How can we actually make use of the healthcare system in order to do so? Oslomatic is also try to stimulate to bring in technology from other sectors into the healthcare sector. Looking into, for example, what have we been doing in oil and gas sector? Is there anything we can learn from that, both from the good sides and not so good sides, etc. And another thing is that we are quite known for being early adapters in general, and we try also to stimulate to be an early adapter in the healthcare sector, building on those types of values. I have been pushing a bit for actually having this seminar on this side of the summer vacation. And one of the reasons is that I was in China in April and have been, I'm in my feed as your feed, looking into what do other countries do. And if you, these are just a couple of examples. Blockchain is, there are, US, China, I think they have built a huge center actually, looking into how they can use blockchain technology into healthcare. And Norway as well need to understand the technology and what can it be used for. So that has been one of my drivers for actually pushing Anna. Anna, I think you should stand up so that people just see you. Yeah, Anna and Wilfred, great partner. Yeah, we will see you, but I think we should do like this. To set up this seminar in June and not in September. We look upon this as a first step. It's a seminar for learning about what is blockchain technology, etc. And we have divided this in 3 parts. First part is to look into what are blockchain and distributed ledger and how can the technology be useful for solving challenges in the healthcare sector. The second part of the seminar, we will look into complex challenges in the Norwegian healthcare system that are interesting to explore for the use of DLT. And then the third part of the seminar will focus on DLT and eHealth. And we will have some user case examples and a couple of initiatives. Hopefully, by the end of the day, we can together come up with some answers with whether we would like to go that direction, that direction, that direction. So I want all of you during the seminar today to think, okay, what can I do? What can my company do? What can my organization do? What is interesting? And let's both use the networking breaks in order to talk about this, and also during the conclusion part close to lunch. Okay? Before we move on, I would like to say a big thank you to our great partners, NTNU, Center for Cyber and Information Security, the Oslo Cancer Cluster, Norwegian Center for eHealth Research, the IOTA Foundation, and Alpha Venturi. And I would say without Willefred, who is going to be the next speaker, I'm not sure if we actually, and Anna in Oslo Medtech, we wouldn't have any seminar today. So actually big applaud for them. By that, we move on to the first part of the seminar, and it is Wilfred Pimenta who's going to talk about, actually, from fintech to healthcare, ABC and blockchain and distributed ledger technology. What challenges can the technology assist to solve? Thank you, Wilfred. While you're finding your own presentation, I will send this list around, and I want you to just sign in, and if your name is not on the list, please just put your name on. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Catherine. I see a lot of familiar faces, but that's great. To continue the dialogue, because this adventure in a way started in 2016. We had our first workshop back in 2016 in November at Oslo Cancer Cluster. Some of you were already in the room, so this is a natural ramp up of the activity. I work today as Business Development Director in the IOTA Foundation. This foundation is a global community, and we'll come back to it later. I have one of my colleagues, Navin, sitting here. He's our health director, and he will be able to dive in all the details from a healthcare perspective. I'm located in Oslo, and the founder of the IOTA Foundation is a Norwegian colleague of ours called David Sundstebø. He's located in Kongsberg, but we'll both be sitting in Oslo after the summer. I wanted to give you a snapshot about blockchain and distributed ledger, and guide you through the story of where it comes from fintech, and why it's may be relevant for healthcare. It's going to be a bit of a high-level storytelling. Navin will later on diving much more in depth when it comes to the technical aspects. This topic is not very easy, but at the same time, we try to kind of demystify the technology. It needs to be addressed because there's a lot of gains to have for public and private sector. It's part of this disruptive change that we're going through, and we need to basically have an attitude of fronting complexity, because those things are coming in anyway, whether we want it or not. And the world of digital transformation doesn't recognize borders. So from a Norwegian standpoint, if we don't do anything about it, it will come anyway through different means, through software, through the Googles, through the IBMs, because those things are going through the digital world. Blockchain arises from Bitcoin, which is an innovation that came just after the financial crisis. Blockchain is the underlying technology behind Bitcoin, and you have probably all heard about Bitcoin. Not sure that you all have Bitcoins, but in some countries they're already using it. It's the first digital currency that is being wide adopted. There are some weaknesses that we'll talk around later on. But blockchain that is behind, what is it? It's a database that is shared and replicated among all parties. And all parties can verify these data sets all together. It's sync all the time. And instead of, in the traditional means, in the way where the banks would be the central point of trust between different individuals that trades value or money, here this is a decentralized database. Many people have the same copy of the ledger, and therefore we can get rid of the third party. We can get rid of the banks, kind of. I'll come back to it after. They see it coming, so they're trying to act upon it. But we can extract the same mechanism to a lot of different things, because in the digital world, something of value is not necessarily money. It could be something related to our healthcare data, our personal data, and there's nothing more precious than our own data. So there's a parallel, and we'll come back to it afterwards. This is part of a movement where we live in a world that was very centralized. The bank was in the middleman between all the individuals trading money, for instance. And blockchain and distributed ledger generally enable the decentralization and ultimately the complete distributed network where we really trade sensitive information peer-to-peer without any people in between. Blockchain enables this to happen, but blockchain is actually only one specific distributed ledger that enables this. There's a lot of buzz around blockchain. We always read it in the media. But blockchain is only the 1.0 version of distributed ledgers. Blockchain came from fintech, from Bitcoin, and therefore came directly into the disruption of the financial sector. That's most people in the world still talk around blockchain from a fintech perspective. Last year, $1 billion were invested in that sphere, and the world's largest consortium of banks is actually one that is trying to figure out how to leverage on blockchain technology. It's R3, and it's a fairly large organization now. It's basically the new age of open innovation. They recognize the disruptive aspects of this for their own industry, so they're all chipping in and trying to figure out how to leverage on that technology. And sometimes we think this is research. We get this a lot. This is hype, and this is research, and it's not relevant. But the fact is that there's already apps that you can download now that are leveraging on the technology that allows things like peer-to-peer trading of money. This is part of a ramp-up of technology. It's a natural continuation from internet to cloud, mobile, and IoT, and now you have blockchain, and it's part of that journey of decentralization. Companies like Gartner identify all those trends related to disruptive technology, and they identify, this hype effect. And I've noticed in Norway we tend to comfort ourselves that blockchain is hype, therefore we just have to wait and see. Somebody will figure it out, and then we'll buy blockchain when it's working. But it doesn't work like this, because it goes very fast. Those technologies are exponential. So if we don't understand what the implication of those things, it will be simply too late. We won't leverage on it from an economic point of view for Norway, and then it will be very hard to actually reconcile those technologies with our legacy systems. So we just need to learn by doing and experimenting. In Norway, the debate has been actually fairly low so far. If you go on Innovation Norway, you put blockchain on the search engine, you get 2 results. It's really scary when companies like IBM says that blockchain could be more important than AI. We don't know those things, so today we're going to try to bring that message a bit up front. So the World Economic Forum has identified this disruption. They talked initially from fintech, and now they see also the potential to leverage on the technology on all different industries. About 4 weeks ago, I think, there was actually a whole day hosted at the EU Parliament. The EU Commission and some of the participants will join us just after. We're hosting a full debate at the EU Parliament, welcoming different blockchain entrepreneurs to explain how we could utilize this for the sake of Europe, competitiveness, public sector, and so on. I don't think there was any Norwegian at that time there, but we're going to have a different twist and lift the debate today. There's an interesting story when we bring this debate beyond fintech, when you combine blockchain with IoT. There's a new pattern that's going to appear, things related to machine-to-machine payments and security of things. Automation is going to arise when we allow machine to trade and automatize systems. And blockchain is a key element. Some blockchain organizations have started to look at this, including Bitcoin and Ethereum and the ecosystem around it. However, there are some weaknesses with blockchain. So my take on it, together with the IOTA Foundation, is actually we're not going to support necessarily use the exploration full speed on only blockchain. We talk about distributed ledgers. Blockchain has some issues. If you look at Bitcoin in particular, it has some scalability aspects, issues. There's latencies and there's fees that are not neglectable. People got very excited about Bitcoin. It's very popular now. People made a lot of money, but actually it's getting very slow, and you have a lot of fees. Therefore, we can't use Bitcoin for micropayments. So Arvid, if I want to send you some money, I can't send $1, or a machine couldn't send $1. It's going to be too much fees attached to that. So people use Bitcoin to transfer big chunks of money. That's the only way it's actually economical. So there are actually some weaknesses, especially when you combine blockchains for Internet of Things. The IOTA Foundation, funded by David Sonstebø, brings a lot of experts from the blockchain space and try to overcome those limitations. They've seen this coming already 3 years ago, so they actually started to develop a completely new architecture that is not blockchain, but it's a distributed ledger. It serves the same purpose, the same vision, but it overcomes the limitation of blockchain. We'll go back to the fundamentals afterwards. I think, Navin, you will cover some of those things. So the architecture is different, and it has no blocks and no chain, and that's why it's going to scale. That's why it's going to provide a means to transfer value between the Internet of Things and ourselves with real time and absolutely no transaction fees attached to it. It's the first system in the world that allows this to happen. The vision for the IOTA Foundation is to serve the emergence of the machine-to-machine economy. And that goes much beyond fintech. It allows cars to buy electricity directly from smart chargers without us taking our credit card to pay for it. It sounds a bit weird right now. It's like, I can still deal with that. But we know that all the automotive industrials are working on autonomous electric vehicles. Then there's no driver to pay for the electricity. Therefore, the car will have to buy its electricity automatically. So we work on projects like e-wallet, the car e-wallet. We work also on the smart charger side to allow those things in the Internet of Things to trade peer-to-peer. There's a lot of business cases we're looking at, and it's very related to business model innovation, if not to say disruption in some cases for some of the incumbents. Decentralized and smart energy, there's something called transactive grid that allows me, my solar panels, sell the surplus of energy from my solar panels to my neighbor, to the electric car of my neighbor. Those things will happen peer-to-peer without necessarily having our retailer involved in the process. Smart supply chains. Supply chains, shipping and logistics can be reinvented thanks to blockchain. And there's something very interesting related to healthcare. And it belongs to the general discussion around my data. We can recover the control of our own personal data. And we'll come back to it, and I'm sure the EU Commission will explain the fundamentals behind it. But there's something quite fundamental in how we can actually reinvent the healthcare system by empowering us to gain control of our own healthcare data. So the three takeaways from my quick introduction is that the potential for distributed ledger is quite vast, and people have recognized it. And institutions, public sector, bureaucrats from the EU sees the potential, and they're getting moving to foster that potential. Blockchain was only the 1.0 version of this innovation. So the real thing we need to contemplate is the distributed ledger technology. The IOTA Foundation has created a new one called the Tangle. There may be some other ones in the future, but this one overcomes a lot of the limitations of the blockchain 1.0. The digital innovation associated to that is exponential, meaning that it goes very, very fast, and it's not enough to say that it's not mature, therefore we wait for somebody else to develop this. The only way to get prepared is actually by getting our hands dirty and experiment. And one of the big reasons is that this is about business model innovation. It's potentially disruptive even to legacy system if we don't enable the transition. Those things need to be worked out together. So that's what we invite basically today, is to actually do that bridge and start innovating together. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much, Wilfred, for that great introduction. Now we are going to have the commission actually speaking to us through Skype. Ane has the connection up and running here. So we'll see how we can actually connect them up. And there are two people from the commission that is going to speak to us. That is Bruno de Oliveira Alves and Charia Massana. They all both are in DG Connect EU Commission. And they, or at least Bruno, he works as a policy advisor at the European Commission Directorate General Communication Networks, working on policy and R&I initiatives promoting ICT innovation to address societal challenges. When it comes to Chiara, she's also an Innovation Policy Officer at the European Commission in the same DG Connect, and she's been working in the innovation field since 2010. She is in charge of blockchain and DLT applications in the Innovation and Startups Unit and is a member of the European Commission Task Force on FinTech. Great.
Can we hear them?
Can you hear us?
Not yet.
Not yet.
They're on mute. Do you see if you muted yourself? If you look at the icon at the bottom. Can you hear us?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
So then you're on mute, I think. Do you see the icon for mute? No?
Interesting.
Okay.
Can you hear now? No? Yeah?
They can hear us, but we can't hear you. Are you guys on a computer?
Do you have microphone maybe? Sorry?
I don't know, anyone that actually are experts on this? That know what we need to do?
Can you play a video and see if the sound comes out this week?
Yeah, but I mean, we can already hear the sound here, right? So my sound is on, but they're somehow muted. So I don't know if they're missing a plug for there. If it says they're not on mute.
Did we put it on now?
But that's ours. No, neither. Ja, det er det jeg
Can you hear us? Yes, good. We have some experts where we can.
She can call us. And
Okay.
We go back to old technology. We have a microphone, right?
Hi. Yeah, so you're on mute somehow, so that either you forgot to plug in. Yeah, and your speakers. Do you have something plugged in somewhere?
Speaker?
Or no?
No,
you shouldn't have to.
We should check with which speaker else.
So were you on your, hang on, I'll let you talk to Wilfred.
Is there any specific speaker output to select from your side? No. Supposed to get out of this.
while we are trying to fix this, talk to the person next to you, tell them why you're here, what you would like to get out of the seminar, etc., etc., and we'll see. Okay?
David will give a presentation. Do you mind doing
Not in Legion,
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we do a quick shift so that we will do the next presentation, and then Arne is out working on the connections to the commission. So next speaker out is Naveen Makandran, representing IOTA, and you're very much welcome to present yourself as well. You will talk about global trends in blockchain, DLT, innovation for eHealth. You are based in UK, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. We flew in late afternoon, so thank you for being here. Special welcome to you.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't expect anyone to remember my name. I put a very small there for that reason. My name's Navin, and I'm a doctor working in the UK. And I got involved with the IOTA Foundation about 6-7 months ago when I started looking at healthcare data. So usually you think of blockchain and that kind of technology when you think about money and transfer of value. Oh, okay, sorry. So you think about blockchain when you think about money and transfer of value, whereas I was looking at it from a more data security kind of perspective. So, how many of you actually know much about blockchain? Or what's the knowledge like? So we have one person, 2, 3, 4, all right, about a quarter of the room probably. So, what is blockchain? So I'm going to say this lots of times during the course of today because it comes across as a very complex topic. Actually, the reality, it isn't. And it's a very simple basics around it which you need to understand. So, this is the picture that's put up all the time. What does blockchain do? At the base of it, it lets two people agree on something without anyone else getting involved. So I say, look, Alice wants to send some money to Bob. So I say, okay, I'm going to send you some money. If I need to do it via a bank, I need to send it to my bank. Then they need to speak to the other bank and agree that that money's there, and there may be some intermediate clearinghouse that has to agree as well, and then after that, they get it. So each person in the middle, there's a bit of a delay, and each bit there could be an error, and there's definitely a fee. So in all of this, each time I do that, it costs and it takes time to do it. And at the same time, you have no idea if someone's adjusted it in between as well. So that you do get fraud in between. So we're looking at fees, we're looking at the time it takes, and we're looking at how secure that data is. So in the new model, in the blockchain model, both of you agree what you want to do. You say, okay, I'm going to give you £10, and the other person says, okay, I will give you £10, English money. And then we store that information on a block. So all a block is a little token. So it's a little bit of information there that we store however we want using the different distributed ledgers. And then we send that block out to everyone. Everyone. And everyone together has to agree that yes, I did send you that money, or I am about to send you that money. And once that's agreed, that can never be changed. It's stored, that block is stored in a chain of blocks that if I try and change this block here later on, it will change everything after. So that means that once this gets recorded, no one can change it afterwards, and everyone has a copy of that. That means I don't need to rely on a bank, and I don't need to pay anyone else any fees, in theory, because there are fees. We'll get to that later. So afterwards, once we agree all of that, we get the money. So all we're saying is this is a distributed way of agreeing that something happened. Okay? Now that's not very complicated. And you think, why does that change everything? The reality is, I have, and I think a lot of other people have started losing trust in some of the bigger companies in what they do in these situations. Are they going to manipulate the market? Are they going to start dealing with their data in a funny way? So this happened. It's not projecting very well, but has anyone come across DeepMind and Royal Free?
Yeah.
The DeepMind. So there's a bit of a, I think you have something similar going on here, but there's a big problem in the UK where DeepMind, which is a Google company, took 1.5 million patients' records and used it for whatever they wanted to. So, and we have no idea when it went, we have no idea what they're doing with it and what the output is. So that's the bit where I got really interested when you think, okay, how do we take control of that data, see when someone's accessed it and tell them, no, you can't do that. So can you use blockchain not just for value transaction, but actually governing that whole data process? And that's how I got into this. So we've got to this before. So this is what they call the hype cycle. So when things come out, everyone goes, oh, this is really cool. And everyone goes, oh, it can do everything. And now we're probably somewhere about here where, especially in healthcare, if you start going to healthcare conferences, blockchain will do everything. It will do interoperability, it will do AI, it will do IoT, it will do everything. Next comes the drop where people realize it can't do that. So we're trying to take a more neutral stance and say, look, these things will never happen. And we're trying to bring in experts from the different fields to say what's realistic, what isn't. Because in the middle of this, we've got to realize there's lots of people trying to make money. And we're trying to stop the over expectations, do something realistic, but do it well. In that vein, what are the big challenges facing us in healthcare at the minute? I think we talked about this in terms of financial stuff, but everything at the moment, at least 10 years ago, used to be very centralized. So either you go to one community doctor, or you tend to go to one hospital, they own your records, and if you want anything doing, it's all centered around that one institution that you go to. If you ever want to move from one institution to the other, a lot of problems. Recently, especially around where I work, we started getting slightly decentralized care where, especially when it comes to more complex diseases, you go to your GP, then you go to one hospital, and if you have a very rare form of cancer, you definitely move to another hospital, to super specialist centers. And we started decentralizing slightly. So some services are outside, some services are inside. So that's probably where we are, somewhere between here and here, depending on where you live. We're about to hit this thing where people have started wearing wearables and started filling in their own health records. So someone has diabetes will have their own record of something which doesn't belong to a GP, doesn't belong to a hospital. So we're here, and we have no idea what we're going to do here. The next thing that's going to happen is there's going to be billions of devices. And we've got to stop thinking about health data specifically and other data, because actually a lot of the data we collect from probably our phone tells us more about our health than things we put into our medical record. So a good example is when you're looking at people who are depressed, one of the best indicators of whether they are depressed at the moment is how much they move around on their phones, or what time in the morning their phone first gets used. Because when they get depressed, they tend to wake up earlier on in the day, and they tend not to go out so much. So they don't move as much, and their sleep cycle is disturbed. So that kind of stuff is what we want to kind of use outside what we typically call health. And most of these devices are low cost. They're consumer devices. So we're trying to reduce the cost overall, rather than having full-grade medical devices everywhere. Can we start using low-cost consumer devices to deliver some value? But that brings its own problems. So we're starting to see the Internet of Things, and people are saying there'll be 50 billion devices by 2020. How do you manage 50 billion devices? How do you know what these are? So when it comes to, we'll talk about different use cases, but things like pacemakers are now connected to the Internet. How do you know it's a pacemaker? How do you know what kind of pacemaker? How do you know if it's dangerous to send the wrong kind of signal to this and kill someone? Especially in the medical domain, that becomes very important. These are some nice devices. This is my favourite. It detects breast cancer apparently. But this is what I mean about the hype. Is that when you start getting technology, you get all kinds of sometimes nonsense on them. You have to kind of sift between it to figure out what's important. And this one's something else we have to think about. So who's heard of the GDPR here? Good. So that's the European General Data Protection Regulations. And that changes. So it changes the whole approach to everything. It goes from this is personal data, or this is, so they kind of said before, this is anonymized, unanonymized data, confidential data, sensitive data we had before. We said, okay, if it's not sensitive, and if it's, you take away the identity from it, then you can use it and do whatever you want. They've kind of realized now that it's incredibly difficult to anonymize anything. So if I give Google a teeny bit of data from your phone, I can remove all the markers, they'll know exactly who you are. So it's very hard to de-identify. And when it comes to that, how do you decide what's sensitive or not? So it may be that, okay, I have got the flu this year. Okay, that's not so sensitive, I don't mind so much. If I've got HIV and I've got the flu 10 times this year, that becomes a bit more sensitive. And you can start correlating things that you don't think are that important together when you have a lot of data. So that's, sometimes we say that's the goodness of big data, that we can start deriving all these bits of knowledge from it. But that's also the danger, that there's things that you never thought you could get out of there that you can. And that's what GDPR starts to revolve around. It starts treating everything as sensitive. It says that if you've got my data, I should be able to move it. If you own it there, you're controlling it, I should be able to move it to someone else. It should be private by design. You need consent anytime you're doing this. So the deep mind thing shouldn't happen again. And if at some point I say, I don't want you to know this, you've got to be able to do that. Take it away, so it comes off your servers. So that's another thing that's going to hit us. The last thing, I think, I've got a lot of slides here, but I'll go through it quickly, is ransomware attacks. So we had this in the NHS about 3 or 4 weeks ago. I was on the BBC last week talking about this, because it took out lots of our hospitals and it stopped working. So 89% of healthcare organisations have been hacked, to a greater or lesser degree, but usually it has a reasonable cost, $2.2 million, and it can go up to tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. And 113 million medical records have been hacked just in the US. Did anyone hear about the IoT attack last year?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's an even scarier thing. So before we used to have big computers were needed to take down these systems. Now they can hack your router or your toaster, whatever is connected. Put some special software in that, and all of a sudden you have 50 billion devices that are ready to hack something else, including the healthcare system. So that's what we've got to be wary of, because if it gets hacked, you start tampering with the files. We've seen it because there's one kind of ransomware or attack where they say, we're locking down your records and you can't use it till you pay us. Easy. Well, easy. That's the easiest end of the spectrum, because you know something has happened. If I was going to be really sneaky, I'd build something that changed people's records and you just wouldn't know about it. Because the future is where we're making all these automated decision processes. So it says, I'm going to take all your data, I'm going to recommend you the best drugs. What if I change your data and no one can see it, and the recommendation is actually dangerous and kills you? That's one way of doing it. So these are the kind of things we've been thinking about recently. Then you have the more bog standard stuff of theft and disclosure of critical information, and we've seen the ransomware stuff. That's the negative side. So this is what can we do here? What role can distributed ledgers play? So this is what you showed this partially before. Can we start bringing this Internet of Things, that AI and machine learning, which can be scary and dangerous, and the distributed ledger together to start having the patient or the citizen in charge of their data? So what the distributed ledger will do is provide a record that nothing's been changed. And I think that doesn't sound much, but if you don't have that security that the data you have is real, then the rest is meaningless. So I think that has to be the fundamental of everything. You can see how much data is there. So there's a good use case we'll come to later in research, in terms of seeing how much data was collected in a research project, and are you declaring everything you've seen? Identity management. Right now, all the systems we have, like your Google login, your Facebook login, they don't scale very well. If we now have 50 billion devices and it's going to escalate, we need a new system that actually tells us what everything is, so we know what's going on in the world. And the last thing, smart contracts. The digital notary is a very nice thing, and that's a very first good use case. This is from a company called Stratum, who've been doing a bit of work on it. It says, has anyone come across rofecoxib and celecoxib, COX-2B inhibitors? No? Okay, it's a medical thing. A few years ago, the drug companies came across what was actually quite a big money maker. It's an alternative to aspirin, which is a very good painkiller. It's called Celebrex Vioxx, that was the name. And all the GPs started prescribing it because it worked well. A few years later, we found out people were dying from strokes and heart attacks, and there was a high correlation with people taking those drugs. And when they went back and looked at the data, we saw that that company had only revealed the data which was positive, and all the other data in their trials which showed that they didn't actually ever declare. So the use of this is that you say, okay, once you start a trial, every bit of data you collect will go on the ledger. You don't necessarily have to show the data, because you only have to show a proof of the data, but when you go back to declare your results, the people licensing the drug can say, okay, that's great results, but you've only shown us 10% of your results. I want to see everything. So it maintains your privacy, but it makes sure there's a bit more openness of what's there. And because it's tamper-proof, they can never change that data afterwards. So we can analyze it properly. Smart contracts. So I'm nearly finished, don't worry. Smart contracts is about how you act on the data. So we said that there's this data you can't change and we can do things with it. Previously, you used to write an application that said, okay, if this, then that. And unless that application was up, it wouldn't work. So everything would have to go via that person. In a new smart contract way, we kind of decide ourselves. So when it comes to help, we can say, oh, I want this person can see this, and this person says, okay, I want Dr. Richards to see this, and this person says, I don't want Dr. Richards to see my health record. That's stored as a smart contract on the whole platform, on the distributed platform. So once that record is there, it enacts it. So Dr. Richards will see that one, but not that one. So that means on top of just having tamper-proof, you can actually have automatic actions on it. So these are the use cases. The ones that are coming up very easily are claims processing in insurance, because this is meant for value transactions and seeing whether something actually happened. That's a natural way you could use a DLT. This we've just touched on, the pharma aspect. Can you show integrity of all your data and fullness of all your data? And I think we will at some point move towards that in the regulatory framework. Well, it'll almost be compulsory that you have to declare it that way. This stuff we'll get to later. So telemedicine, patient-centered management, data pooling for research and clinical trials, and precision medicine on top. Those happen when you have a completely scalable architecture where you can secure all data. And we'll talk about that in the next talk. There's lots of people involved. There's a lot of money going into, you talked about how much money is going in, and these are a lot of the companies already involved in healthcare-related blockchain. They're all early stage though, and they're all quite reliant on Ethereum and Bitcoin, and we don't think that will scale. I think that'll change over time. So things to think about. We think there's a significant role in healthcare. There's some startups, and a lot of the giants are already involved. IBM have 3 divisions, so they made a new division. So if you say a third of their business, 1/3 is AI and Watson, another third now is blockchain. So if a company as big as IBM is saying they're going to devote that much time, it's probably worth looking at. We've said if we've got to deal with AI and IoT, but if we can harness it together with the distributed ledger, we may be able to do some new stuff. But the old generation blockchains won't work. And this is our final plug. I'm from the IOTA Foundation, so I'm going to say it's revolutionary, and I'm going to say it's better. We'll go into that in a bit more detail later. Okay?
Thank you. Excellent. Thank you so much, Navin. Now we have been able to connect up with the commission, so Anne will plug in, and the sound is okay. And we will have the EU Commission talking about unleashing blockchain DLT potential for the public sector innovation and European competitiveness. Specific priorities in the eHealth sector. And Bruno and Chiara, they are working on the Commission's strategy on blockchain and actually how to spread this strategy out to all the countries in Europe. I think we start there so that we are you
ready? Okay, over to you guys.
Yeah, can you hear us?
We can hear you. You try with your headphones again? Wait, no, actually I think we're fine. Hang on.
That is good.
Trying to get the sound on. Yes, you're on the screen now. Okay, so let's just hear. Audience, can you guys hear them okay? Or is it too low?
No. It's too low.
Too low. Loudspeakers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just tried to unplug yours. Well, we shouldn't have to use it. Okay.
No, I think you find it's on our side here.
Oh, it's on. Okay, try to say something now. Do you guys say something? It's still very low on our end. Yeah. Okay. Well, let me try to call the IT person. Yeah. Try a different thing.
Yes.
Okay, you guys try to speak.
You might not understand the search and consent, and I think that must be something that has to be much easier than yes.
So there's actually a lot of work involved.
That will work.
Yeah? Hang on, we're trying. We just got a speaker now, so it should be okay.
All my health, my HIV and my diagnosis. You've got to give people the option to do it.
Try speaking now.
By default, it has to be very easy.
No.
It has and it has to be easy understandable because you can something that's been on.
Yes, we can hear the fine. Can you hear us?
Many years. It doesn't work, and that
Hi, madam.
kind of how to work.
Det må finnas en tidningsinlägg i programmet.
So really giving them it's very it's important and
Try now.
and still if you can say
We can hear you, we're just working on the microphone side.
would be and then
Once again.
if I was
Hello? You still can't hear us? Well,
they can because
The room.
if I can think of something in my mind, yes, you can access but not all and that's where coming
Okay, we're all set.
so I think I'm getting
we can't hear you now.
You can hear us now?
We can't hear you.
So you're muted.
That's okay.
Can you hear us now then?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's good. Trying to understand
Okay, we can start.
Yeah, we're just getting you up on the screen so that people can see your lovely faces.
normally very unless the focus on the people understanding because everyone's working on the thing.
Perfect.
We're ready.
Okay, we're good to go?
We're good.
Excellent.
Good.
I'll start by thanking all of you for your patience and apologizing for the kind of technology hiccups. Hopefully, technology is a wonderful thing, by the way, as you all know, when it works. So, but let's start, and I'll start by introducing myself. So my name is Bruno Albert, and I work here with Chiara in the European Commission. Maybe let me just explain you in a few words why we're even attending this conference. I work at DG Connect, so that's the technology department of the European Commission. And within DG Connect, within the technology department, we have one team that is looking particularly at how technology can be used to address societal challenges. And obviously health and demographic change is one of our priorities when we look at our societal challenges that we face in Europe. So the starting point for us is that we recognize that health and care systems in general in Europe are facing many challenges, notably the fact that we have an aging population. That means that we have an increase or a prevalence of chronic diseases that our healthcare systems have to cope with, and that means more demand for healthcare services at times when sometimes economically we are, as you all know, going through a period of rationalization. So as we're having an aging population, the spending on health and long-term care is increasing, and that puts additional pressures on our healthcare systems. The reason why we got involved in this area in the first place as European Commission, and particularly our Directorate on technology, is because there's a firm belief that through technology and through technology innovation, we can actually transform this challenge into an opportunity for new services, new ways of delivering health and care to our citizens, but also an opportunity to achieve more sustainable healthcare systems, more efficient, more tailored to the needs of the individual. And finally, because we believe as well that through the support and enabling conditions that we need to have for digital, we can create economic growth. We can create economic growth, and we can support some of our SMEs, some of the startups, and some of our most innovative industrial players that are active in this field. So this is what we call the triple win. We think there's an increased challenge put on healthcare systems, but we actually think that technology can help transform that challenge into an opportunity. We're not at all saying that technology alone will solve all of our problems, will solve our public spending challenges, our healthcare provision challenges, but we think it can help. And then with that in mind, one of our key pieces of policy is what we call the digital single market. So the digital single market was an initiative that this European Commission initiated. It's focused on around 10 priorities. And the objectives of this policy initiative is really to make sure that to open up new digital opportunities for people and for businesses, and also to enhance Europe's position as a world leader, both in the digital economy and the digital society. So that's kind of the context of our policy work. And within that, more recently, in fact, in May this year, we've included as part of our digital single market policy a particular focus on health and care, on the digitization of health and care. And again, the objective here for us is really to look at as European Commission, recognizing that there's a process of digital transformation that is impact many sectors in the society, including the health and care sector. How can we make sure that process of digital transformation is actually going to lead to benefits for citizens, for the users, for the patients, and also for the healthcare systems. So the whole journey started in May this year, when the European Commission announced that they would be looking at making some proposals this year, specifically on technology and digital technology for health and care. Priorities that were at the time identified as well, and this has been the focus of our work pretty much since May this year, have been identified in three major areas. The first one is that we want to, across Europe, we want to enable people's access to their health data, okay? Secure and private access to and use of their health data. So that's one of our first priorities. One of the things we really want to enable and to look at is how can we make sure that every European citizen will have access to his or her own electronic health record, and will be able to provide authorized, secure access to that data to other players, whether those are professionals or other healthcare professionals or any other players. So that's one of the first priorities of the things we're going to be looking at. The second thing is around a data infrastructure that we can develop at the European level, together with those member states that are willing to move, and regions as well, that are willing to move faster in this area. The principle is that there's a recognition that we can make significant progress and advance health and medical research by ensuring that we have an environment that enables the sharing of data, large data sets. We're not only talking about anonymized data, but also other types of data that are important to advance medical research. And so we want to make sure that we have an environment, and that is an environment, when we talk about an environment, is an environment that is a regulatory or legislative environment that allows for the exchange of health data, but also a technological infrastructure that could allow that to happen seamlessly and to benefit ultimately the faster diagnosis, the better or more personalized medical solutions to offer to our population. And then the third priority is around moving from what we see today is a significant amount of pilots and sometimes large-scale pilots of digital technology for health, when lots of new technology, lots of new services and solutions are being tested in a very kind of small, limited environment at the local or at the regional level. And we want to make sure that in Europe we have the muscle, on the financial muscle, but also the regulatory and cooperation muscle to actually support the scaling up of some of these solutions across borders, so that we can create those scalable markets that we need to make sure that a lot of the technology or the technology innovation, technology that is emerging can actually be made available to more people across Europe. So those are the three priorities, and within those three priorities, what we're doing now is we're preparing a communication that will come out later in this year, and this communication will actually have proposals. We'll have proposals from things that the European Commission can do, but it will also launch a challenge to those member states, regions, and industry stakeholders or economic players that want to work with us around these three areas to join us and to start working to develop those three particular areas. Now, in what concerns the European Commission, we have three major instruments, and they will be kind of identified and described as part of the communication. And those three instruments are, number one, our funding instruments. We have, as you probably know, a research and innovation funding called Horizon 2020. But we also have other instruments, for example, the Connecting Europe facility, which is funding dedicated to help member states and authorities develop infrastructure that can support the exchange of data, etc. So we're going to be looking at that particular instrument, see how those instruments can actually, in terms of funding, support the three objectives that I just described. The second one, the second instrument that we have at our disposal is legislative, is the legislative instrument. So the previous speaker mentioned the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation. That will come into force next year, and we want to make sure that in the case of health, we have a good understanding at the European level, but also with all the stakeholders at local level, and with the member states who are responsible really for making sure that their regulatory frameworks are compatible with the European framework. We want to make sure that we have a good understanding of how GDPR can help or hinder what we want to achieve in terms of the exchange of data and the access, guaranteeing access to citizens to health data. And then finally, we have a third instrument, which is around the EU coordination, and it's a really important one at this stage. As you probably know, there's limited competence of the European Commission in terms of healthcare policy. And so we need to work closely with the member states on this one. Not necessarily, we don't expect necessarily all member states, we would like to, but we don't expect necessarily all member states to come in and say, we want to do this together with you. But certainly we want to work with those member states that are moving faster in this field, and we want to understand what they're doing, we want to understand how we can help them go further, particularly if this means meeting the objectives, the three objectives that I just outlined. So with some of the proposals that we've been working on, it's really important also that we understand what the citizens are ready and what people want to do, not only the member states, not only the industry. And we've done some work already this year trying to understand the position of patients, of citizens, concerning access to their health data, the management of their health data, how willing they are, they're looking to share that data, and some of that information has been already captured in a recent Eurobarometer survey. But there's a few snippets that I would like to leave you with that I think are very relevant for our discussion here, and particularly around the use of technology. Most European citizens, from what we could see, wish to have electronic access to their health records. But at the same time, we found out that only about 9% of healthcare providers in Europe allow citizens to access their data. And in many cases, it's only partial access. The percentage of healthcare providers that are actually exchanging data about patients in electronic means with other healthcare providers in other countries is only 4%. About 70% of European citizens are willing to share their health data with others. So there's a variation between countries, but there's an overwhelming response from citizens who told us we would be willing to share our health data if that means it means better healthcare, better treatments, better diagnosis, faster diagnosis for my health. And then we realized as well that by pooling research, by working together across borders on using data to advance research, we realized that there's very significant benefits that we can generate. One example that is often quoted is that of rare disease, rare and complex diseases. Today in Europe, it takes about, on average, 5 to 6 years to diagnose a rare and complex diseases. If we join forces and if we join data and we use some of the high-performance computing capacity that is already available, we could reduce that to about 1 year on average, the time it takes to diagnose a rare complex disease. So those are all indicators that say that there's a real interest for us in investing in this area. There's a real interest in working together with stakeholders in seeing how we can make sure that we create an enabling environment that will translate into better health and care conditions for our populations and more sustainable systems. In terms of the technology, the technology aspect, DLT is one area that we're looking at with great interest, because I think we recognize that there's a huge potential in DLT to change and to actually help us deliver on the goals we have, and I've just described to you around access of data, sharing of health data. So what we're going to look at in the next few months, and as we're developing this communication, is to see how DLT can also help us achieve those objectives. There will be, and this is an important point, and it's my last point, there will be an open public consultation that will start in the next couple of weeks and will be open until September, where we will be seeking input from member states, but also from regions, from healthcare providers, and from startups and innovators, and look at, how can different technologies play a role, and what are the things they need to happen at a European level to move this agenda forward. So we look forward to also having you involved in that. Again, I thank you for your time to listen to us, and hopefully we can carry on the dialogue in the next few weeks and months, probably not via video conference, but hopefully in person. So thank you very much for your time.
Wow. Thank you so much for your time and for being patient with us as well. Actually, together with the companies here, we solved the challenge. So big thank you. One question, very, very short. We will not spend too much time on it because we need to move on in the program. But would you be available for questions from the audience here, from companies, for healthcare providers, etc.?
Yeah, we would be available. My colleague Chiara will tell you also a little bit more about the blockchain work.
Yeah, I will be quite fast because we are a bit beyond schedule. But just to say also that on the same technologies, the DigiConnect, we have another unit working more with innovation and startups. It's working as well with innovation procurement, so for public procurers to develop innovative solutions and solutions that are not still available in the market, which is called pre-commercial procurement. And we have one sector working especially on emerging technologies, fintech and blockchain. I had a much more long speech, but just to let you know that we are quite committed that blockchain and DLTs are in our midterm strategy on a digital single market, and they are identified as a potential breakthrough technology, of course, to be leveraged according to use cases. And that we started with a particular interest in fintech, because it was where investments happen and where industry was going. So we were co-working with our FISMA colleagues, which are colleagues on financial stability and market stability within the Commission, to explore how DLT and blockchain could be applied into financial services, to disintermediate the process and to gain efficiency. Hello. I can just see one girl now. But anyway, but of course, as a DG, which is transversal, we are looking much more beyond financial services and fintech. And indeed, we constituted this first task force dealing with fintech, and one work stream was dedicated to DLTs. We just closed an open consultation on fintech, which was mentioning DLT as a possible innovative solution, among others, which could bring benefit to the industry and to the bigger and the small, the incumbent and the smaller player. But we are looking beyond, notably possible application in the e-health sector and e-government sector, but well beyond supply chains, IoT, as it was mentioned before, origins of product, for instance, which could be well applied to pharmaceutical products, fight against counterfeiting, IPR management, music rights industry is trying, I mean, from the inside to being disrupted by this innovative use of blockchain. We are trying to see how we can improve inside the Commission our own processes. We are looking, for instance, at energy and European Trading Exchange Scheme, VAT and taxation. So there are main use cases that we are looking at from a European point of view. To be brief, and to conclude and to let you discuss more on the healthcare sector, we do acknowledge that there's potential, but there are a number of challenges that we identified that started from scalability at the beginning because of the financial sector moving and transacting larger volumes and doing lots of operations, but also to other kind of challenges which are legal, which are regulatory. It was mentioned GDPR. Do we have the right to be forgotten when we are on a blockchain? How do we handle this? Do we have the right, I mean, where does it take place? Which law to apply? Which territoriality of the blockchain? Is the fact of having a document on a blockchain a proof, a source, a single source of truth or not? Is it legal valid? Are smart contracts enforceable before a court? Who's liable beyond smart contracts? I mean, challenges are there, and that's why we decided to launch a public procurement that will be done this summer, and we're all invite specialists from blockchain and public sectors, workers to come together and to answer to our procurement, to have set up a European blockchain observatory and forum, because we think beyond monitoring technological developments and challenges ahead, we need to discuss more and to come together, public sector, regulators, supervisors, to try to understand, to have a cost-benefit analysis on why and if this technology is useful, because we do stay technologically neutral, but it seems that this technology has got a lot of potential. So why and if this would be useful, in which use cases, and try to develop a sort of European approach in which you have a knowledge and expertise hub where you can come, discuss, find out, and be helped to develop something real, concrete, and to test. A last thing I would say that we are not just having this observatory, we are planning a bit ahead on a sort of European blockchain initiative that may comprise some parts related to infrastructure, of course linking with what's already happening in the member states. We have Luxembourg with this interchain project, which is quite ahead. We have Malta reflecting on blockchain, and Prime Minister said last week in the digital agenda event that we organized as the GConnect, that Europe should be the blockchain continent. So of course we are in the hype for the moment. We're trying to cut into the hype, but we are also funding research at the European level through specifically Horizon 2020 project. We have already funded some. I will just mention one, My Health and My Data project, which is exactly looking at things that are of concern of my colleagues at eHealth unit and of your concern and your ministries. How can you handle data in a more private way, in a more secure way, but giving the access and the rights to manage this data to the patients and to the users. Okay. So this is the My Health, My Data project, and we are going to fund a few other pilots in the next year and years to come, especially related to the healthcare sector, digitization of healthcare and healthcare sector, and e-government services. So stay tuned, because we would like really to have good project proposals to demonstrate the feasibility and to try, as my colleague Bruno was saying, to move forward from this first stage of very experimental, first early pilot project, proof of concept and pilot project, something which is demonstrated and can be played in a real world. And very final point on the sandbox. It's a concept that you will be exploring this afternoon. Sandbox for us is a wide concept, but in essence, it means that we can experiment something together, not waiving regulations, but trying to understand also with regulators, supervisors, and innovators what can be done to have a test with possibly real data on real life conditions and to adapt also according to the needs of both parties. So many thanks for your listening and looking forward to connect you in reality.
Yeah, well, thank you so very much for both sharing the strategies and also being, I mean, you're quite concrete, and we would very much like to stay connected. This is the first seminar, at least as Oslomatic is having on the blockchain and health, and I mean, this is the very first step, and we don't stop there. Yeah, I don't know if you saw the audience and if this can help out, but the audience is quite broad, and you are.
If there are any questions, let us know.
We will. Yeah, maybe we can actually gather them on email and send them to you, if that could be okay.
Perfect.
Okay, and if you would like to follow the seminar, we are on Facebook, Oslo MedTech. Look up blockchain, so you can follow the rest of them.
We are watching you.
Very well. Okay, big applaud for you, actually. Thank you. Bye. Okay, thank you. I think that was good. We are approximately more than 20 minutes late, according to the program, but I think it was really important to bring in the Commission, and it's good to know that they actually are very much aware of this. Task forces, and there will be calls, etc., etc. So important information for all of us. By that, we move on to the second part of the program, looking into complex challenges in the Norwegian healthcare system that are interesting to explore for the use of DLT. And the first one out to look into this is Anders Feien, Microsoft. And Anders is going to look into how does recent developments in disruptive digital tech create opportunities for new models for patients and healthcare systems in Norway. Thank you, Anders.
Thank you, Katrine.
Yep.
Do I have a clicker?
Yes, we do have a clicker.
So while we're waiting for the clicker
Yep.
and the slides,
Just stay in melon them.
there is a famous Norwegian painter that I once wrote about. That's called Edvard Munch. He used to have competition for funding in Oslo because Gustav Vigeland, according to Munch, used to steal his ideas. And he got a lot of funding from Oslo to build this fabulous Vigelands Park, you know. And Munch just hated it. And he hated it so much that he wrote at the bottom of his tax declaration every year that none of this money shall ever go to Gustav Vigeland. And I'm thinking, that could actually be done if you had something like blockchain today. We trust the government and our banks to not use my money for things I don't like, or that is unethical, or unlegal. And in this globalized world, we don't really have the basis for trusting everybody right now, do we? So to be able to build this trust is really the key element, and I'm going to look a little bit into the Norwegian healthcare space and what aspects of the Norwegian healthcare could really benefit from an infrastructure that would let you keep your health data and get more control over it. So let's look at a little bit, just a high level. It's really three problems that is dominating the Norwegian healthcare space. One is impossible to see for you, but complexity is killing us. I love healthcare. My dad was a doctor, my wife is a doctor, and my daughter is studying medicine, so I've given up. I'm only studying medicine and technology for medicine now. So, but this complexity, my dad really had three things that worked. This is after the war in Norway, and now there's about 10,000 procedures that you can choose from to treat people. And the number of diagnoses you can have is increasing by the day. So being interested in healthcare is getting more and more complex. So this is really the root cause for being able to handle all of the problems in healthcare. The way we handle it in Norway, as a lot of other places, is we divide and conquer. We take every problem and we break it down one more further. And so in specialist care, you have 10 to 15 silos, and in the municipality care, you have 10 to 15 silos as well. And so this breach of having information flow to have money flow, it's 3 levels. You have 3 colors here, so it's like 3 different sectors of the economy that needs to work together, and they don't. So it's a lot of breaches that hinders people from doing positive collaboration and doing cross-functional collaboration. And this is especially important in the old people and the multi-sick care. We always say in Norway that we have the best health data in the world because we have very good health registers. But the people that end up in there and that get researched on, they only have one thing. It's the first thing you do for research, is you eliminate everybody who has 2 things, right? So to be able to treat people with multi-illnesses, and if you're 70, you have 2 chronic conditions on average. If you're 80, you have 2.5, 3. If you're 90, you have 4 chronic illnesses. And living with them for the rest of your life is sort of the sport. And this longitudinal thing and being personalized around the individual, we really struggle with. So even if we have good health data in the registers, we're not really helping the individual to tune the medication and treatments to the individual and to personalize the care. So that's sort of the systemic problems in the Norwegian healthcare. And then there's all of these purple. They are in the private sector, like the general practitioners, the patient, and the specialist operating under government contract. They can buy stuff on the global market. And the problem here is that the Googles, the Facebooks, the Apples, the Siemens, the IBMs, the global, the Microsofts of the world, they are spending about 90% of the R&D in the health tech field today on addressing the 6 billion people that can actually buy services on the global market over the internet. And since it's these people's money, then they will be able to buy this on the internet. And so how do you control what's positive for the population? How do you use this in the Norwegian governmentally controlled health service? And being able to do the dance between these type of services and the services that we create in Norway, which is probably the best in the world right now. But this is a challenge to handle this development, and it's not really easy to step out and not be part of this. So how do we become a part of this in a constructive way? So that's 3 challenges that I see for this sector. In the tech area, we know that we have a computer on our desk. Now it's in our pockets, and in 20 years it will be in our bloodstream. That's sort of the development. And this miniaturization is driving whole new types of systems. And we see one positive aspect of this is that we can get in non-invasive glucose monitoring that can help diabetic patients manage their chronic disease through their life. It's about 400 million people that would really benefit from that. The negative side is that when you get consumer technology to do something like in Norway in HIV, I think it's less than 1 per 1,000, or much less, 1 per 100,000 that has HIV virus in Norway. And if you get something like a $34 sensor and you test yourself for HIV with a cell phone, and say it has 95% accuracy, you're going to generate 50 false positives for each true HIV. And these 50 people are going to be really scared. And this is a really, really bad idea. So using consumer technology on really rare illnesses is really bad. Now, how this will be handled in the global consumer market is through wizardry over machine learning, artificial intelligence, all these kind of things that really feed on data, huge amounts of data, not just the health data in the registers, but everything that's being live tracked on people. And really this, there's only limit to how you organize and how much data you can get and how this is going to work. And so this is really the sort of the promised land of health tech, to do everything and help with artificial intelligence. So I think if data is the new currency or the new oil, as we hope it is in Norway, that we can use this for business development and sell to Indians and to Chinese and to the American market, then how do you keep this data in the bank and give consumers the control that Edvard Munch wanted 100 years ago? And I think that blockchain might have possibility here. This is a quote from McKinsey article that's called Using Blockchain to Improve Data Management in the Public Sector. And they quote from Estonia, where they are using a keyless technology to store your health record on a blockchain. And they are looking to expand that to all public services. So this is already being done on a national level to create a more longitudinal record in the sense that was introduced earlier in the seminar. So it's already been done, and I think if we want to be able to do business development on Norwegian citizens' data and being able to make technology and algorithms that we can export safely, we need this type of technology to give privacy by design to the citizens. So if I wanted to say a little bit of the economics in the Norwegian healthcare system, they don't pay for price performance, they pay for quality. So if you're below quality, they will automatically correct themselves because we have laws regulating what kind of service you can get. And the one that they struggle with the most is to coordinate the services. So we have very good services all over. We have a lot of continuity and electronic patient journals and so on. And we're getting even more ones, and they're investing a lot in this. And we're really accountable, so it's a really good health system. But the stuff where blockchain and internet can really hit the Norwegian healthcare service hard is they have basically skipped 3 generations of technology. Nothing is native web architecture, nothing is native mobile architecture, and nothing is, of course, blockchain. So I think in order to not skip one more wave, we should start paddling now and get on this wave and learn what is to be learned about this technology to see how it can be integrated with the systems we already have. So how would this model look like if you had a blockchain-driven thing? We have one member of MedTech, Oslo MedTech, that is looking into this. They are inventing a non-invasive glucose monitor in Fredrikstad, which means you're wearing a monitor all the time, and all of the signals, it's being stored in a digital archive. And for any clinical condition, or multiple conditions, you can access specialists or coaches for that condition on a global market. So it's a network model. Don't know if, are you familiar with ShareCare? ShareCare in the US, they organize 100,000 health providers in a network, and there's 42 million users of the network that can access their doctor in 3 minutes via chat services, and they get referred to the specialist, and the referral or the next consultation costs less than what you pay for the insurance in the regular healthcare. So it's a new model, it's a network-based way of organizing the care services. And we've sort of missed that because we don't have a web architecture. So this is working on that type of architecture. That means that you can have the patient agree to do research on your data. You can treat your data with all the new algorithms that become available. You can use it for fitness, and if there's anything seriously wrong with you, you will have already the sensors hooked up. So in seconds and minutes, everybody will have access to your critical health data. And this typically takes, in a reactive care service like we have in Norway today, it typically takes days, weeks, maybe months to get to a stage where they continuously monitor your health status. So this is a more proactive care model, and it's using the data that you generate while you are in control, and then it can be transferred to anybody who can help you when you have lost control of your health status and your health situation. So I think my background is really sports. I used to be in sports for 10 years before I started in technology. And we have breaks in techniques in sports. This is high jump. And every time there is a break, it takes time, like 3 to 5 years, to practice and find out what is required for the new technique. And this is just development with humans. This is the human development aspect of it. So if you have a vision of what Norwegian healthcare system or the global healthcare system or the European healthcare system should look like in 2030, you got to find out your strengths and you got to experiment. And these experiments are to sort of evaluate what is the one thing to solve all for eternity, but it's really to discover the new competencies you need to practice, the new skills that everybody in the system needs to have in order to perform the next type of service. And coordinated care and team-based care and handling the multi-sick is really the biggest challenges that the Norwegian healthcare system is about. And I hope we can establish a playground on the blockchain to really see if we could leapfrog the type of services we can develop on that infrastructure. And the last slide is from my sponsor, Microsoft. And we do these type of playgrounds as a service. So you can basically rent one. That means if you're a startup, you can have one for free. We have 600 companies in Microsoft's BizSpark program that basically lets you experiment with all these technologies. We have about 50 that receives significant support in Norway and can use these services for free at up to 2 years. And so that's a good way to start playing and figuring out this is really an open system, so you can use an IBM blockchain, you can use a DLT technology, IOTA technology on this, Ethereum, and so on. So it's really open in terms of what type of blockchain technology you do, and you can use client tool set that fits your development skills best. So it's a pretty open blockchain sandbox that you can do here. And I think with that, I'm open for questions if there are any more.
Thank you, Anders, for digging even more deep into the whole thing and being actually quite, what you say, accurate about what we can do, how we can use it. Yes. 1 or 2 quick questions. Very short. And tell us who you are, name and where you come from.
My name is Gupta. I'm project manager at the Micro Cluster. I have a question regarding your last slide on Microsoft. You said that you have sandboxes of different blockchains already available. So what do you think that is hindering the implementation of those in the healthcare technology in Norway?
I don't know. I haven't done the sandbox yet. That's what we find out when we typically do one. But what we have in the sandbox is eliminating a lot of the programming, scaffolding work that you do typically to, well, you don't only need the blockchain, you also need to have it in a private database. How do you couple that up? How do you integrate with identities? How do you organize the teamwork around the source code? How do you deploy changes to the project? And stuff like this is built into the blockchain as a sandbox service.
You have this blockchain tech, and you have this blockchain technologies from different companies, and then you want startups or some new players to make the sandbox.
I think it's the other way around. We have really tried to make it a 3-tier development. So you do your logic in Azure, and then you can easier rip and replace blockchains underneath if you want to play with different blockchain technologies. Make sense?
Thank you. Hopefully we will have time to have a break as well. Then we can talk more about all the different initiatives and what we can do together. Anders, thank you so much. You will stay here? Very well. Thank you. Good. Then we move on to Marie Mo at Sintef. She is going to talk to us about connected healthcare and the rising challenge of privacy and cyber security. Maria, can you hear us? No? Just make sure.
Oh, we're ready. You're on, Maria. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hello.
Nice. So we have you on the big screen. So go ahead and do a brief introduction of yourself, and then you can start with your slide deck.
Thank you.
Do you hear me okay?
Yes, very well, thank you.
Good. So I'm sorry I couldn't be with you today, but I'm happy that we have this connected technology so that I could be here anyway over the internet. So my name is Remo, and I'm a research scientist and research manager at SINTEF Digital in Trondheim. So I'm a security researcher, but I'm also a patient. I have a medical implant myself, a pacemaker, and this is what inspired me and motivated me to start doing research on the security of this technology. So let me just switch to my slide deck. You see my slide deck now?
Yep, we do.
Okay, good. I can't see myself anymore, but here you see another picture of me holding a pacemaker that we have been opening up to look inside in the lab. So I'm going to talk about how connected healthcare comes with security and privacy issues. So before I start going into technology, I want to just give you an idea about give you a small biology lesson. So what happened to me was a bit more than 5 years ago. I was working at the time with defending critical infrastructure systems in Norway from cyber attacks. I was working for the government at the NorCERT, National Security Authority, and running the operation center, which was 24/7 operations where we're looking into alarms about cyber attacks. So my background is that I have a PhD in information security, and also have some experience from the industry working on R&D with connected cars technology, and then incident handling at the Norwegian CERT. And so I was on my way to work, and suddenly I just fell unconscious to the floor. And it turned out that there was a problem with my heart. So the electrical system of the heart, as you can see in this slide, works by the sinus node, generates a small electrical current, a signal that makes the atrium contract, and then this signal travels down to the ventricles, and then the ventricles also contract. On the way from the upper heart chambers to the lower heart chamber, the electrical signal gets a small delay in the AV node, or atrioventricular node, to make the pumping of the heart become optimal, so that the blood flows through it in a good way. In my case, I suddenly had something called an AV block that I just acquired. Means that the electrical signal was stopped on the way from the atrium to the ventricles, and the ventricles were left on their own in how to contract and pump the blood through the heart. And this made my heart become very, I had an arrhythmia, and also it became unsynchronized sometimes, and that led to a pause, my heart stopping for a while, which then made me pass out. So I was admitted to hospital, and there was an easy solution to the problem. It was to have a pacemaker implanted. The pacemaker works so that there are two wires connected to the heart from the pacemaker box. The upper wire listens to the atrium to see when the signal is generated by the sinus node. The lower wire is then listening to the ventricles to see if the signal comes through. And for me, 100% of the time, the signal was stopped. So the lower heart chamber needed to be paced, and that's why I'm 100% depending on the pacemaker. There you can see a printout from a checkup I did in September last year. And from this graph, you can see that the upper, or the ventricle from the upper line is at just a straight line at 100%, and that means that my ventricles are paced all of the time. The lower graph is how often the atrium is paced. And this is during the course of a day, or a bit more than 24 hours. And you can see that I'm paced also in the atrium, but that's usually during the middle of the night when I'm sleeping. The reason that I'm paced also in the atrium is because there's a configuration setting on the pacemaker. So the lower, or the least, the lower heart rate I can get is 50 beats per minute. And sometimes when you sleep, naturally your pulse will drop below 50 beats per minute. And for me, that means that the pacemaker also kicks in and paces my atrium in case my natural pulse drops below 50. So in a way, this is unnecessary pacing, but it's due to the way that the device is configured and tuned. So there are lots of things you have to adjust in the pacemaker. It's like configuring a computer when you insert it in the patient. It needs to be tuned to work with the patient. The other picture you can see here are some of the chips inside of the pacemaker. So this is one of the pacemakers that I acquired in my hacking project, that we took apart in the lab to try to identify some of the chips. So I was inspired to start a hacking project because I'm depending on this device, but there's no transparency on how it works. So I was really curious. I started asking questions about whether or not my pacemaker had some security vulnerabilities, whether there were bugs in the code, if it could be hacked, and the healthcare professionals couldn't answer these questions. So that's why I had to seek out the information myself. And I was invited 1.5 years ago to give a keynote talk about how it is to be a security professional and depend on a technology implanted inside of your body that you do not trust. Because I didn't trust the technology. I couldn't find information about how it worked, and I know it's based on old technology, and the connectivity to the internet is what bothered me the most, because I know that this is something I've added to these devices in the early 2000s, and because of long lifetime of the devices, because of no regulation, no requirements to security, the security has been implemented poorly in many of these medical devices, and we're in a desperate situation right now where hundreds and thousands of patients are living with vulnerable implants inside of their body that can't be easily patched. So moving on, this is what I discovered after I had the pacemaker implanted. I found information myself about how it worked. I found the technical manual of my device, and I was surprised when I found out that my device has two wireless communication interfaces, two antennas inside of my body. One of them is used for configuring and tuning the device, and this is the inductive near field communication. And I'm really happy that we have a wireless connection for this, because you do not want to open up a patient every time you need to adjust the setting to tune it to work with the patient. But the other wireless communication interface is what in fact connects me to the Internet of Things. And no one informed me about this technology, that this was built into my device. I did not sign anything or consent to have this interface implanted in my body. So the home monitoring works the way that you need to have a special type of router, a modem, in your house. And typically you will have this in the bedroom, maybe on the bedside table. And during night, when you sleep, a wireless connection is established between your implanted device and the router. patient information is retrieved from the implant and then transmitted either over the telephone network or via the internet. And there's a web server, server with a vendor which is not in Norway, which is abroad, where all the patient information is stored. And then there's a web portal where healthcare professional can log in and see your patient information. And of course, this is very beneficial for many patients. They don't have to go in that often for checkups and can get a more close monitoring if that's needed. For me, with my condition, don't need that close monitoring, close follow-up. I only need to go in for a checkup once a year or twice a year at the hospital. So for me, that home monitoring is switched off. But anyway, it's easy to switch it on just by a setting in the programmer. And as a security professional, I see this added connectivity as an added attack surface. And I'd rather have an implant that was not connected to the internet. So it worries me that we add connectivity to these things without also building in proper security to the devices. So what could possibly go wrong? Of course, you have patient privacy issues. So patient information is transmitted over this wireless communication interface. Another researcher in 2012-2013 showed that he was able to build a custom, he just used an antenna, software-defined radio and his laptop, and he was able to scan a room and get all the serial numbers and patient names and data from scanning a room with people. So if anyone in that room had pacemakers, he could retrieve their patient information because there was no encryption. Some of these devices do not implement authentication or encryption of information. You can also think about other types of attacks that are more life-threatening. Battery exhaustion attack is something that is particular in the threat model for medical implants, because the battery lifetime is really crucial. For me, my battery life lasts 10 years. Means I need to have another surgery to replace the device in 4 years' time. And every time you do a surgery, there's always a risk of infection, so you don't want to have unnecessary surgeries performed. The way you can drain the battery of an implant with wireless communication is to just initiate a lot of communication to the device, because that uses a lot of processing power. So the pacing itself doesn't use that much of the battery, because it's a very tiny electrical signal that is used to keep the heart going. But every time you initiate communication with the device, you can drain the battery. And also researchers have shown that it's possible to perform a battery exhaustion attack like that. And then you can also make the device malfunction by giving it the wrong configuration settings. If you hijack the communication channel between the programmer and the device. And it's also shown that you can do this by hijacking the communication channel between the home monitoring unit and the device, which is a worse scenario, because in that way, since these home monitoring units are connected to the internet, you could imagine a scenario where you could compromise all these home monitoring units at once, and then make them send malicious packet injected to communication with the implants of many users at once. And then you can think of even worse or other similar bad scenarios, like we had a lot of ransomware lately, especially targeted to the healthcare sector, or especially the healthcare sector and hospitals have been especially hit by ransomware because they have a lot of patched, outdated systems on their networks. And the latest ransomware wave, the WannaCry attack, just a couple of weeks ago, actual medical devices on the hospital network got infected by ransomware. There are no examples examples of medical implants being infected by ransomware because they're not on the hospital network the same way as these other devices. But this is a future scenario you could think about. Then, of course, there's more targeted type of attacks, like in the US, the previous Vice President Dick Cheney had a cardiac implant, and he actually got his wireless connectivity removed from the device because they were worried about remote assassination scenarios via the implant. I don't personally worry about that. I think there are easier ways to kill me if you want to do that than to attack me with a programmer for my device. Yeah, oh, sorry about not warning you about the graphic image. I hope you tolerate to see some fake blood. This is an example of the result of how it would look like if someone with a hacked pacemaker came to the hospital emergency room. So I was part of a simulation exercise at the University of Arizona in just 2 weeks ago. This was really intense and really groundbreaking, never done before experiment simulation. It was at the medical training school where they educate doctors. So they have these rooms that are set up for performing different scenario simulation trainings. And in this conference that was focused on cybersecurity in medical devices, they had developed 3 scenarios of hacked devices. One was an insulin pump that was hacked. The other was that the equipment in the emergency room and pump delivering medicine was hacked. And the third was that the patient came in with a hacked pacemaker. And this is from the third scenario. So they started with an actor, and then during the simulation, before they did the really invasive surgeries, they replaced the actor with a dummy like this. So in fact, the patient lived in this scenario, but they had to resuscitate him 3 times during over a course of 10 minutes. So the scenario was that the pacemaker had been hacked in such a way that it delivered a shock every minute. And if you get this shock at the wrong time, it's like playing Russian roulette. Your heart will stop. So the patient came in, his heart stopped 2 or 3 times before they could get the cardiologist on call on the phone to instruct the emergency doctor what to do in this situation. And what he was instructed to do was to actually do an emergency procedure where they disconnected the wires to the pacemaker. But of course, since this patient also had the underlying disease that was treated by the pacemaker, in fact, the exact same disease as I have, third-degree AV block. Once they removed the leads to the wires to the disconnected the wires to the pacemaker, his heart stopped, since he was 100% dependent on the device. But he survived anyway because he had been resuscitated. They had attached pads for delivering shocks on his body, and these pads can also be used to deliver external pacing to a patient. So in all 3 cases, the patient lived despite the hacked devices. But you can see here how it would look like in case someone comes into hospital with that in such a scenario. Twist to this was that none of the doctors involved knew about the hacking part of the simulation. They thought there were usual cases coming in, and they treated them like they would with other patients with heart problems and so, and with malfunctioning devices. So you can't really know if a device malfunctions because of hacking or because of something else. No reported events of patients dying or being hit by hacking of the medical implants have been reported so far, but there's insufficient procedures for doing this type of reporting, so don't really know for a fact whether this has occurred. So over to the more personal part of the story. I myself have been affected by software bugs in my device. It was actually a configuration error that I discovered. This was 4 weeks after I had the surgery initially. And actually the first time I sort of stress tested my device, I was back at work and I was doing a training course in London. And I walked up this really long staircase from the London Underground. I came almost halfway up these stairs, and then I realized that my pulse was sort of cut off. I realized that something was wrong with the pacemaker. It felt like hitting a wall. I couldn't get enough oxygen. I hardly could manage to get up these stairs. And but I recovered after a while. I had no idea what hit me, but I knew that it had to do with the pacemaker. So when I get back from this training, I complained to my doctors. I cannot exercise. I suddenly get out of breath when I'm trying to exercise or trying to just walk up some stairs with my pacemaker. And they didn't believe me. They thought I was a really difficult patient because I complained about this. It turned out that there was a default configuration setting in my pacemaker that made it have an upper rate limit of 160 beats per minute, which maybe is suitable for an 8-year-old patient, which is actually the typical person that receives a pacemaker implant. But it was not enough for me, a much younger person. So what actually happened was, when my pulse hit 160, it was in an instant switched down to 80 beats per minute. And that didn't give me enough oxygen, really bad. The reason that I didn't discover this, it took 3 months until they corrected this configuration error, was because of a software bug in the programmer. So the number that was displayed on the screen of the programmer for my upper rate limit was not 160, it was something else. So there was a calculation error in the programmer that led to a lot of confusion about this. So it was only when I did an exercise test and were monitoring that they figured out what was wrong with the configuration. But once this was resolved, I could then go back to exercising as normal and live my life as normal. And my pacemaker worked perfectly until this incident or event that happened to me in September last year. I was on my way to a conference in the Netherlands. I was flying, I was up in the air, and suddenly my pacemaker failed. It went into a backup mode, backup safety mode. And it turned out that the most likely cause for this was that I was hit by cosmic radiation that caused bit flips in the memory of my device that made it malfunction. But I was lucky, I was saved by safety engineering, because they had this hard-coded backup mode that switched up the electricity of the pacing. It also kept my heart running at a constant pulse of 70 beats per minute. When we landed, I had to go directly to hospital, and this is me after a night I spent a night in hospital because they didn't have any pacemaker technician on call. So in the morning, he came in, rolled in this table with 4 different programmers. The reason that you need to have a table with lots of different programmers is that all the vendors produce the devices with different proprietary communication protocols. So you need to have the correct programmer to the correct device. And I look quite happy here because I know I had been informed that there was not a hardware issue with my pacemaker. I didn't need to have surgery. It was actually corrected by having a firmware up. I needed to get a new firmware uploaded to my pacemaker, and then it was reset and back to its factory settings. And then there was a problem about getting hold of my configuration settings. Luckily, I always ask for a printout of all my settings when I go in for checkup, so I had this lying in the office in Trondheim. So I called up my colleague and I asked him to scan in all my configuration settings so that we could get it back to its original configuration. And then I was free to go from the hospital and deliver my keynote talk the next day. And this actually also sort of helped in my reverse engineering and hacking project of pacemakers, because I started this project to try to get hold of my data inside of my own body, which was something that was proprietary and that I couldn't get hold of. But as I had this adverse event, a crash file, the memory dump, was actually generated on the device and on the programmer, and I got hold of a copy of this and got some access to my own data from the device inside of my own body. So that was also a kind of lucky outcome of this event. So why are we in this situation where we cannot really trust the security implemented in medical implants? It's because we are living with a lot of legacy technology. It's a problem with the long lifetime of the devices, and some of them are not easily updated. Also, there's no security testing or monitoring of the devices. It's proprietary software. It's strictly regulated, but there's a lack of regulations for security. So you have lots of regulation of safety for the devices, but not of security. Then you add the internet connectivity, which leads to an increased attack surface. And also, the vendors that are creating the software for healthcare sector are lagging behind in building in security measures into the devices. This spider plot from something called the BSIM study, where 95 firms have been studied to see how they are building in security into their software development lifecycle processes. And you can see that out of the 95, 15 were in the healthcare sector, and they are in the inner circle, which means that they are not really doing a lot when it comes, for instance, to security testing, code review, architecture analysis, and so on. And compared to the cloud vendors, for instance, which is the outer circle here, they are lagging behind. So what we need to do to solve this problem? We need more security research. We need innovative solutions for building in security to the medical devices. And I guess this is why you invited me to this workshop, because you are looking to how to use DLT blockchain technology, which I haven't personally looked into much, but I can see that there are lots of challenges with cryptography, with authentication, and so on. That would be interesting to see how this could apply. So we need more security research. We need more collaboration between the vendors within the security researchers. Coordinated disclosure is also something that is important. So once you as a security researcher find a bug, you need to know how to contact the vendor and work with the vendor. The vendor can be made aware in many ways. One is, of course, regulation, but also procurement. When you purchase devices, you can actually start making requirements about security. And also building in and testing, as I already mentioned. And while products that are already on the market needs to be monitored for risk, and there needs to be ways to actually update them and have resilience into the devices. Also, software liability is something that I think could become a big important issue in this area for the future. I'm also part of a grassroots organization. This is something I do in my spare time, which is called I Am the Cavalry. You can look up this URL if you want to know more about what we're doing. But basically, we are concerned with problems where human life is affected by security issues. And we published last year this Hippocratic Oath for Connected Medical Devices, which are 5 steps that we want vendors to adapt in order to have a future with more secure products in medical devices. So please look up more information about this if you're interested, or reach out to me. So I just want to end this presentation by saying that technology saved my life. And I'm really happy that I'm here today. I can give this presentation. The benefit outweighs the risks, of course, for me personally. And here's also a picture of me finishing the half marathon in Oslo 2 years ago, which I'm really proud of, running with the implanted device. But for the future, I think that more and more of us will become cyborgs like me. This is not something that's just affecting me and my life. We will have much more implanted devices, wearable devices, personal area networks that needs to be secured. And also patients need to be able to make a risk-based decision of whether or not to have different connected devices in and on their body. So thank you. I don't know if we can do any questions, any Q&A session over this channel. Is that possible?
Hi, Maria.
Anyway, here is my contact information. Anyway, if you want to contact me.
Very, very well. Can you hear me, Maria?
Yes, I can.
Very well. First of all, a big, big thank you for a very strong story. We are quite big audience here. I'll actually turn around the computer so that you can see all the people, maybe. If you can wave the hands.
Hello.
Yes,
Nice to
hello.
see you all.
Thank you so much for your story. I think you gave a lot of food for thoughts here. And I think that we will bring that with us in the next parts of the seminar. Unfortunately, we are, as you know as well, we are running a little bit late. So
Yeah, I know.
I actually suggest that we move on. It would be very good if you are able to follow us on Facebook. We are streaming the seminar. And we have your email, etc., so people can send in questions themselves. And then also on behalf of Oslo MedTech, again, big thank you. And on the partners as well. And we would very much like to stay in touch with you. Because you have, your experience is so useful, both for those that are developing the technology, developing solutions, etc. And so thank you for sharing. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you. Very well.
Have a nice day.
Yes, same to you. Okay, bye-bye. Okay, we are running late, but this is, so good stories and important aspects of the whole thing as well. So I suggest that we actually continue with the program, and hear Bayern Yang from NTNU CCIS talk about secure data management towards DOT for eHealth. We will have a break, and I would like those speakers after the break to actually, just before you have a break, come and talk to me, and then we will see if we can actually strap in the program a little bit. We continue. Whether you are able to shorten down, that would be great, but your main points, I'm pretty sure those are important for all of us. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you as well.
Thank you. My name is Yang from Center for Cyber and Information Security, which is affiliated with Department of Information Security and Communication Technologies and NTNU in your wake. We were scientists in information security, cybersecurity, researchers. And until a couple of months ago, I was actually a layman about the technology about DLT or blockchain. I just saw a lot of news, bad news or good news about Bitcoins. And then I was thinking whether this is a very nice technology that we should consider for our security use. For example, one of the use is the data management in the application scenario of health data. Then I was linked by one of my colleagues working there next to my office, who is indeed a expert in blockchain, asked me to be here to provide our perspective or thoughts in our minds. What could be the challenges we are facing now? So this slide's more about this background, so not that about DLT, but we will see some, if we can identify some chance that new technologies can help. I captured this photo from 1 month ago in Malta eHealth Week, and it's about the expenditure on healthcare. So we have this linear projection in several decades from now. We have this averagely 30% of the total GDP will be spent on that. I would not say that is a very sustainable system. I mean, if you consider the current healthcare mode. And this is especially a challenge for Nordic countries. As you know, we are basically funded by tax. Most of the healthcare services are provided by the government, the public sectors. And they are going to cover almost all the populations. There's a relatively low percentage of private players there. And people think maybe we can use eHealth technologies. Could be a good means to achieve a sustainable healthcare mode. And we have some basis because, for example, in Norway we have the statistics, we have this high internet penetration rate. So people, even old people, they are familiar with how to use technologies. And also I have a lot of discussion with my colleagues. People think, yes, in Norway we have relevantly good infrastructure for eHealth. For example, we have this health.no, which provides a entry point for citizens to see their critical information provided, for example, by the China Journal. And also, we have colleagues working in Trondheim. They're working at this grand idea of one patient, one journal, which is called Health Platform. And in the most part of Norway, they also established very good infrastructure in terms of telemedicine. And in terms of the professional operators of this infrastructure, we see Norsk HealthNet, HealthCert, they mainly working to deal with the emergencies in the cyberspace. And also we have HDO to deal with the emergencies in real life to save our life. Besides, we have ICT providers like Suknes Partner. And the idea is healthcare needs data because data is a great asset for healthcare purposes. And if you look at what type of data, we have all types of data, not limited to clinical ones. Also, we found one more data generated from the patient themselves. So we call the patient-generated health data. In the future, we should consider this as well into our healthcare system. And other operational data like agreements, like identities, transaction reports, logistic data that can be used for evaluating the performance of the healthcare system. And we have already know a lot of stories and examples how data analytics can improve the healthcare quality. I will not go to the details because of the time constraints. And if you look at the players about in the scenarios of data management, we have we talk about the patient-centric healthcare. So we put the patient in the center, and the patient may leave the life trace or health report to a different, we call healthcare organizations or different players here. And nowadays people like to talk about versions. For example, blockchain 1.0, 2.0. Here, people also talk about health. What are the difference between the different versions? If we talk about different versions of eHealth, so if we can define health 1.0, it is the starting point. That means different organizations, GP, municipality, or hospital systems, they can convert the paper-based reports to electronic ones. So the target is EMR, electronic medical reports. And the challenge is there are still data silos. There's no established ways for sharing such data for either research or clinical use. Then people think about this second version. And I would say for the moment, most of the member states in EU, including Norway, we are still towards on the target of the second version. So the second version will be we can establish a rich file about one patient. So it is really patient-centered electronic reports. So we call it electronic health reports. In this way, we can enabling a, for example, longitudinal study on the patient's life cycle data. And also we can connect all these HCOs, and they can share the data for a better service. And we are facing challenges. For example, how can you ensure the data quality and the interoperability if you want to combine all these systems? And the systems are more complicated than EMR. So if we put patient in center, the patient need to make a decision, give a consent, how to make an informed consent. A lot of difficulties are actually, the burden is lying on the side of patients. And of course, privacy and security concerns. And we talk about the future. The third version will be the combination of the reality and the future, something not happened yet. So the reality is we have already EMR, we have already EHR here in the real world. But something is emerging or not happening yet. We call it patient-generated health data or any health services not happening yet. If we combine these two into a scalable system, the system should be harmonizing both these part of data. So we can call it personal health count, which is unique for this patient. And if we put the patient in the center, the patient can also use advanced data analytics to use it as a service, make their own research, and maximize the health care informatics for their healthcare benefits. And the essentials of this future version. So in this case, the patient will have the full control of the health data, their own profile. And we talk about the patient-centered data management that indicates the patient can decide what data to share with whom, for what purposes, at what time, for how long, and well, which channels. And if we are patient, we are going to make so much decisions. I believe we are feeling some stress. How can we make a wise, informed decision? Then we have another challenge. How the patient can make, for example, a good privacy configurations to manage their own data. For example, to which degree the personal information can be shared, and at what conditions the privacy configuration can be changed. A lot of questions are facing for patients. Now if we look at the key factors and challenges in secure data management in this field, if I can use just one sentence, that could be the main challenge is the data management across the data silos. There were different challenges like security and privacy concerns and lack of interoperability. The first one, regulation. And currently, I believe a lot of HCOs, the healthcare organizations, they tend to be conservative when they are asked to share their data because there are different trust domains. For example, in Norway, the local health authorities, between them, there's still no established channel to establish official data exchange. Because of the major inhibitor is the regulation. Currently, we have many regulations on different levels, on the EU level, on the national level, but we should also keep this in mind. All these regulations, they give some constraint on data sharing, ask the partners or organizations to protect the data. However, the assumption is always data sharing should be encouraged. So we can also capture this point from the EU communication. It's that privacy concerns are legitimate concerns, but should not be used by public authorities as a reason to restrict the free flow of data. It is very easy to say so, but we need some technology to enable this, to make this happen. Then another factor is the patient needs. For example, as I already mentioned, different patients, they may have different acceptance if you consider the balance between privacy and the health benefit. Different people in their mind, they have different threshold. However, the regulations are very hard to be personalized. So we can see those two different directions. How to make this harmonized is always a question to us. And other challenges, for example, if you allow the patient to make the informed decisions, some patients may make a wrong decision. The wrong means from the perspective of medical staff. And also the GDPR, they requires that the HCOs, if they want to share the patient's data, they should ask for explicit consent. So not only consent, but explicit. This might be more burden or disturbance to the patients and also the organizations. So how to consider this? For example, the explicit consent should be made only once for all, or for each operations. And another challenge could be, we think about the portability is also defined by GDPR. But if you ask, if you're a patient, you ask the hospital, say, I need my data, I need my records. Can you share it with me? I have a memory stick. In most cases, we will be refused because memory stick is not allowed by the security policies to insert to a hospital system. Then you are waiting for a long time to generate the paper-based reports. And you may also be asked to pay for this effort. And others, like who is going to pay for the formalities like the format harmonization if we are really to implement the requirement of portability. And also, for example, how to do this translation and who are going to pay for that. And we have regulation issues, we have these factors from privacy needs, patients' needs. We also need to consider the data management models. So far, if you look at the EU member states, we have these two categories. The first one is centralized national health data registry. Including Norway, we established a centralized database. And the citizens, professionals, they have this entry point to access. And still we have the two subcategories. The first subcategory is the case, you have a centralized database, you can provide to each citizen an entry point. Norway is in this case. And in UK and Sweden, it's different. If the patient needs a access point to the database, need to use an agent like a GP or hospital system. Another category used, for example, by Poland. They use centralized health data index. So not directly to store all the data there, but store only the index. And then the index can be used to channel different health organizations to share the data. And also, finally, we can talk about some enabling security technologies if we talk about secure data management. Besides the general ones, like firewalls for network, intrusion detection, data backup, crypto mechanisms, we might also need to think about some special needs from the health data management. For example, if we can outsource the patient's data to a public cloud, I know that this is not allowed so far by the policy, by the regulation in Norway, but could be happening in the future. And still, if you want to outsource your data to an untrusted party, you need to be equipped with some enabling technologies to make this happen. So we talk about, for example, another hot term today, homomorphic encryption. you protect the data, you still can retrieve them and compare them in the protected domain. And we talk about the secure multi-party computation, a lot of new technologies. And not only storage, we can also consider how to secure the data outsourcing for sharing among different organizations. And we also have some technology like attribute-based encryption, re-encryption, and the last consideration is the identity management in this complicated ecosystems. So the final observation is, if you look at all these enabling technologies, yes, they may work very well for a standalone system for the moment. But my opinion is data can be shared, but it's very not easy to share the trust and assurance. For example, if a hospital wants to send a report about one patient from one local authority in Norway to another one, the other one, the recipient, must assume the data he or she received is in high quality, or it is created in a genuine way. It is authenticable by the other peer. So this is a basic trust. A GP has to, for example, another example, assume the radiographic report from the radiography service providers it is reliable in quality. Why we have to assume this trust? Because they are independent organizations. So what could be the traditional solution? For the moment, we use standards. We think, okay, if you are satisfying all these criteria and specified standards, we trust you, or certifications. But this is normally very high, complicated in the workflow, not real time. And that leaves a room, in my opinion, for DLT to explore how we can use a distributed ledger, because it's a shared ledger. All people trust on that. So in this case, not only interoperability can be achieved, but also the trust and assurance. For example, if some people want to share a data in an illegal way to another party, this can be immediately reported by blockchain or such DLT technology. Okay, I think I will ignore this part. I just want to share with this opinion that if you look at DLT, it may bring a lot of benefit for healthcare data management. For example, if you consider the smart contract could be a potential way to make the regulation also personalized for patients, that could be a nice idea. But I know this will not happen in a couple of years, but at least the technology can give us some inspiration in that direction. And also, if we consider patients' needs, we can also use this public ledger to disseminate in a very efficient way the best practice, how to configure the privacy configurations, how to best satisfy the needs of patients. And also, the technology provides inherently a unique chance to realize this trust the domain auditing, because it is very flat structure. And still, if we think about whether we are facing some challenges, if we think, okay, DLT do have a lot of benefits, the challenges could be, for example, several examples. DLT is the essential idea is to keep everything there without any chance to change it. But we do have some cases. For example, GDPR have the requirement of right to be forgotten. If you have a right to be forgotten, that means you should have a chance to modify that history. And also, inevitably, there's some mistake can be made there, and people should have some chance. But this is arguable. Different people have different opinion. And also the second one, we are actually working on this direction. For example, if you assume blockchain is a public ledger and unable to change, how can the owner of the data prove ownership to a specific person while still keep it as a secret from other person? So this is some research need to be done on that direction. And besides, we have this traditional, or say it's inherent weakness of the computational power attack associated with blockchain and the DLT, and whether this will generate some impact on health data management. We don't know. We don't know yet. Thank you. That is from my presentation, and welcome to contact me or my colleagues. We can have a lot of chance to discuss this interesting technology if we have chance.
Thank you so much, Bjørn. Very, very well. You are part of the, I think we are about to form a task force here, actually. That might be one of the endpoints of today. And you'll be part of that. I suggest that we, instead of doing questions, that would have been great, but let's have the break. I think all of us would like some more coffee. It's coffee and tea outside, and when are we back? If we can be back in 12 minutes, okay, 15 maximum, and then we will shrink down the last part so that we will try to end around 12 o'clock. Thank you. One more thing, the list that has been passing around, you all for sign it. Where is the list now? Very well, Katarina has it. If everyone is signed, good. Thank you. Coffee.